Welcome, welcome. So today's episode is all about accelerated online courses. And in case you didn't know, my doctorate is in online education, and my dissertation was all about how to design and deliver accelerated online courses. So when I say accelerated, I mean courses that are delivered in a shorter time frame than is traditional. And accelerated courses have actually been around for a long time. It started with training physicians during World War II because we wanted them to get up to speed very quickly. And there have been several times since then where emerging workforce needs or societal needs caused explosions in accelerated courses. And so these courses all feature very intensive workloads because you're trying to master a subject more quickly. And we see them all the time now, actually. If you're used to a 16-week semester in college, but took an 8-week summer course, that was a condensed or accelerated course. Same thing, condensed, accelerated. You got the same credit as a 16-week course, most likely, but you completed it in half the time. And now I see universities offering accelerated courses year round, not just in the summer. So there are more starting points for learners. You don't have to wait till semester starts in January. Oh, I could start in March or May or just a variety of times throughout the year. And there's also currently a trend of 3-year degrees versus 4 because people want to get done faster. And in professional settings, maybe you want to train your staff or clients in a shorter period of time, maybe because they need the skills more quickly. But I think most of the time it comes down to it feels easier to commit to, let's say, just a few weeks to get the results you want, as opposed to a few months. And so we see them all the time. So, what I do see is folks not considering what subjects are a good fit for an accelerated format and how to actually, even if it is the best format, how to actually make the most of your time in an accelerated format. So, most coaches and organizations, they choose program length based on convention, not design. Like I said, it's easier to market, hey, learn how to create your own course in 3 weeks as opposed to 3 months. Or sometimes I'll see really popular things like a 3-day Telegram group. Well, you'll learn all the skills you need to make a killer mastermind or to create excellent marketing. Like whatever it is you're trying to learn, we compartmentalize based on I can do anything in 3 days or a week or just a few weeks. It sounds much easier than something that may take several weeks or several months. So it's a mindset game most of the time. And at the end of the day, though, accelerated formats shouldn't be about speed. They should be about fit. So, in this episode, I'm going to share with you how to know when an accelerated format will work and when it might hurt your learners. So, to start, I want to help really reframe what most people get wrong about accelerated courses. Faster does not mean easier, and it certainly does not mean better. So I think the temptation when considering an accelerated program is let's just keep everything the same and move faster. And that's where a lot of accelerated formats fail because we physically cannot take in the same amount of information in a shorter time period. There's no time for reflection or really integrating it and applying it. There are some tricks though. What actually works is thinking about what are the true non-negotiables? What are those clear learning outcomes? I've said it a million times and I'll keep going back to it all comes down to learning outcomes. So you have to decide what is it that I'm trying to get my learners to accomplish by the end of this program? What is that promise you're giving them? Okay, so what is feasible? Working backwards, how do we get there? And so in an accelerated format, more than any other, it's vital that you cut everything that doesn't help you move the needle to that end result or outcome. So you have to be super clear on what you want your learners to accomplish. You start there, you build backwards, you cut the rest. And I like it in the fact that accelerated formats force you to focus on what matters most. And that clarity benefits your learners and the format so much. And I see a lot of times when people are designing things, they start with topics. They know the topic and they know a lot about the topic. And so they want to teach either everything they know or they've had some fun activities that really help to influence them or help them along the way. And those are nice to haves. But if they don't actually directly help the learners get to the outcome, then it's not necessary. It's only going to cloud the learner's judgment. It's only going to make things more complicated, make things feel heavier and more time consuming. And so it is, again, always nice to have an outside perspective because you might be so tied to it. Our emotions get in the way, especially when we know a subject really well and we've mastered it or gone through the process at multiple stages. You'll remember, like, ooh, that was helpful or that was fun. And it may be, and I'm not saying you shouldn't include things that you find helpful or fun, but if you can't directly align that activity or that resource with the learning outcomes, it's probably not helping in the way you think. And I would consider that fluff. So think about what really helps. It all has to align. So that's the first thing I want to share. And what I found is most of the time when faculty members, let's say in a university, condensed a course from 16 weeks to 8, they always cut something. You just can't do the same amount. And usually it was the social angle. And I'm going to get to how we socialize in an accelerated online course in just a minute. The next thing I want you to think about when trying to determine if an accelerated format will work for you in your course is there a sequence? Is there an importance to the sequencing? So that's a true vulnerability because a lot of subject matters, it will build upon itself. And so everything moves sequentially. And for instance, you're not going to become a master violinist if you're never taught how to properly hold the instrument. That comes first. There's a lot of subjects where you have to master step 1 before you can move on to step 2, as opposed to other subjects where there's a variety of topics. And just because you don't fully master step 1 doesn't mean you can't move on. And I would call that a more modular topic. And so great, you can kind of choose your own adventure, start wherever it interests you, or the fact that, yes, maybe there's an ideal order that you think is helpful, but if somebody doesn't fully master step 1, it doesn't prevent them from moving on to step 2. So think about that sequential timeline or that sequential learning sequence. If you do have a sequential topic, you can still create an accelerated format, but remember, if a learner falls behind, there's almost no recovery time. So your design has to do a lot more of the work up front. Clear instructions, better organization, true clarity and transparency over what's coming next. I've heard it been called, gosh, we need to idiot proof our course. And I don't like that phrasing because I never want a learner to feel like an idiot. I never want anybody in any classroom ever to feel dumb, especially when it comes to taking in a lot of new information. And so I do think it's important to consider the user experience because if they are confused, if they feel frustrated, if they are not sure how to excel or succeed, it'll kill their momentum. And most likely, if you are moving from one topic to the next very quickly, they're just not going to keep up. If they miss 1 week, they're going to feel behind. They're going to be most likely nervous about asking questions. They think it's just them. They don't want to throw everybody else off. And so thinking about what is truly feasible for your audience, if they are busy working professionals, if they have families, if they are running their own business and doing multiple things, certain things are definitely possible. Like, hey, let's get them going quickly because they are motivated. But at the same time, what's the fallback plan if your learner falls behind? So I think it takes more hand-holding, a little more intentionality from the facilitator to make sure that you are checking in, because a lot of times I will find a simple check-in to say, hey, how are you feeling this week? Or, hey, you didn't turn that in, or you were quiet on our call. That simple check-in gives them the opening to say, oh, you're right. Like, I feel behind, or I'm a little confused about this activity we were doing this week, or I didn't finish it. And then you can often just give them the simple reassurance or answer they need. Sometimes it's as simple as, I didn't know where to look. I didn't know where you posted that video. I didn't know how to fill out the worksheet. I didn't understand what you meant by this question. Or I am not sure if I thought of a good idea. And it's certainly possible to help somebody catch up because life gets in the way, and I always want to be flexible where I can be. It just means, great, I know it. It means that learner says, the teacher, the mentor, the facilitator, the coach, they see me. It's okay. Even if I am a little behind, I can catch up. And I know this experience in the summer classes I teach. I know it's a much faster pace. And basically, I will spread things out in the fall when I teach the same class. One module will go for 2 weeks, as opposed to in the summer, it only goes for 1 week. And I know that there's kind of slightly like a build up week by week. And so I try to, if somebody's getting behind, check in on them and help them catch up, saying, this is exactly what you need to do. Make it as clear, succinct, and direct as possible so they don't lose hope, they don't lose faith. And then the rest of the experience, however many days or weeks that might be, doesn't make them feel like they're off. It's such a sign of support from you as the instructor just to reach out to make sure they don't get behind. Along with that, it's also important, and I make this very clear in my accelerated courses, that it's going to move fast and it's really important that they stay on top of it. So there's this thing about workload where it doesn't necessarily matter how much work there is. It's that mentality of, do I think it's going to be a lot of work? Am I setting my expectations properly? So letting students know, yep, you need to check in every day, or I'm going to check in at this time. I advise you to do the same, or here's when and where I'll make myself available each day. So setting those clear expectations is super helpful. So the other thing I would recommend is giving them some time expectations, as in, hey, it's really helpful if you can spend 2 to 3 hours a day focusing on this to really make the most positive improvements or to stay up to date with the content. So whatever it is, give them those expectations so they're not surprised thinking, oh, I'm going to sit down at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and just whip this out. And you're like, oh gosh, it's more work than I expected. So anytime you can encourage students to build something into their schedule, into their calendar, then more likely they are to accomplish the goals that you've set for them or set with them, ideally. So this brings me to the social trade-off in an accelerated program. And this is an interesting one because I do think interaction and social community is so important in an online learning space, especially because you don't have the water cooler talk. You're not sitting in the same room at the same time. And so I do think socializing is important so we can see where we may fall behind, learn from others, encourage one another's, feel like you're not in it alone. But in most accelerated programs, that's what typically falls to the wayside, the peer-to-peer interaction. However, it's interesting because the student to teacher interaction actually gets stronger. That instructor presence is so important. You are their guide. You are helping them through the journey, and you are also their lifeline if they get behind. They need to feel comfortable asking you questions. And so you may not have time to build a full community or socialize everyone as a group, which, yes, can be a drawback. But to make up for it, the recommendation is that you strengthen your relationship with students because they're relying on you to keep them on track, letting them know the clear expectations, how to structure their time, what to expect, making sure that they don't fall behind so they feel comfortable letting you know if they need help or are struggling. And to do this well, there's a few things. So I find that using more videos so they can see you, so they can hear you and know you, get to know you as a real person who also has struggled and made mistakes and isn't perfect, who genuinely cares. That is most important. More check ins and faster feedback turnarounds. So, if you have comments or thoughts or responses to questions learners have asked or materials that they have completed, then the sooner you get feedback to them, the faster they can take that feedback and run with it, make improvements, keep going. So that is how you build trust with your students. So they ask questions and show themselves to make mistakes. Again, that's where the learning takes place. So instead of socializing as a large community, it's really important to make yourself available as an individual. And I do find like it is that paradox because it'll strengthen your relationship, even if it feels less social overall. But I also find that small groups work really well for accelerated programs. And a one on one typically works really well because unless the goal is to create community or the cohort relationship, then you may not need that as much. And so, with that, if the goal, like I said, is to create community, learn from one another, build that cohort relationship, I would probably say an accelerated format may not be the wisest. Again, if it is, it's still possible to make it work, but you have to be super intentional. You can't just hope that interaction and socializing happens naturally. You need to encourage, you need to partner people up, you need to ask your learners to interact with each other in some way that's going to get them to that more social result that you're looking for. So I love the intimacy that can be established between you, the coach, and the client. In accelerated formats, you're in something intensive and you're in it together. But if there's more of a culture that needs to be established, then your accelerated format may undercut that. And again, if you're still convinced, yep, I got to do it quickly, I think it's possible, then just be very intentional about how you're creating those opportunities for social interactions. So, this brings me to one of my last points. It is, should you accelerate? Let's talk subject fit. So, not every subject is worth making into an accelerated format. And I've already talked about this. But one thing I want to add is subjects that depend on reflection time or community interaction. They need time for discussion. One of the first coaching programs I ever went through, I was a new stepmom and I was learning how to become less reactive to a very difficult co parent. I had just gotten remarried. There was so much inner work I needed to do as this new evil stepmom. I really threatened my stepson's biological mom, not by anything I had done, as much as just the fact that I suddenly existed. And so that wasn't something that I could just complete a workbook, learn the skills in a weekend, and be great, be healed, be okay. It was such a long healing journey. I needed months of practicing mindset shifts, how to not react to everything that was thrown at me as a new stepmom. And like I said, it wasn't going to happen in a weekend, but I could, for instance, learn how to, I could put together a freebie in a weekend. That's totally doable. Or I was mentioning that summer class I teach at the University of Colorado, Denver. It is on how to create an online course. It is a lot of work to do in 8 weeks, but it's absolutely possible. It's more of creating artifacts and materials, curating things. It's not the same as changing a fundamental behavior. So I suggest that you think about whether your clients need processing time in between sessions to integrate what they're learning, and some transformations can't be rushed. Mindset work, identity shifts, some sort of embodied skill development, those often need longer spaces. And accelerated formats just don't allow for enough reflection time. So it's okay. That's one of the most valuable things you can do. Give them time between the sessions to practice, integrate, change, reflect. But just know it just may take a little longer. So, one of the clearest findings from the research that I completed in accelerated formats, confusion is chaos. It is just catastrophic potentially to a learner keeping up because there's no buffer. So, a poorly written module or unclear directions or a bad assignment, something that's maybe missing a piece of context. In longer programs, you can recover from those, but a condensed one, they really derail everything. So that means your design has to do the heavy lifting. Clear structure, transparent expectations, the seamless navigation, they aren't just nice to haves, they are absolutely essential to whether a student completes your program or drops out. If you're going to run a shorter program, it feels like less, but you probably have to invest more time in the design up front, not less. Your time that you put in up front saves your learners time in the interaction with them and the content. So it may not save you time designing it, but the goal is to save them time. On the positive side, I will say that I evaluated dozens of courses from faculty members, if not hundreds, who undertook teaching an accelerated course. And one thing that I learned, and one thing many of them felt, was that it made them a better teacher because they cut the busy work. They wrote clear instructions. They got right to the heart using video and really intentionally reaching out to build strong connections with their students. They became more empathetic. They understood when students maybe didn't meet a deadline. So that teaching presence, being genuinely available, responsive, having a really clear structure, that turned out to be the core competency they learned. Rather than really anything about the content itself, it made them a better teacher because of how they interacted and designed the content. All right, so let me wrap up by sharing the 3 questions I would ask when determining if an accelerated format is right for you and your program. Number 1, is the transformation sequential or modular? Modular means the units can largely stand alone. They can stand on their own, be completed in various orders. Those can absolutely be accelerated, but in a sequential format where each lesson or each phase builds upon the last, you may need a little more breathing room so learners don't fall behind. Number 2, does the learner need integration time? If the change you're creating is cognitive, like just knowledge, understanding new frameworks or information, that can often be compressed. Focus on the learning outcomes, you're there. But if it's more behavioral or identity level, time is part of that transformation. So be thoughtful before rushing it. And then number 3, is your design ready to carry the load? So, accelerated formats will often expose any weaknesses in your design instantly. If it's not already super clear with the instructions, with the explanations, with the examples, if it doesn't have a tight, clear, well structured design, compressing it will likely only amplify every flaw. It won't hide it. You won't get through it faster. Your learners are going to get confused or frustrated and more likely to fall behind and not get that transformation that you've promised. So, those are my tips and tricks for considering an accelerated format. As always, reach out if you have any questions, choosing the right format, deciding if accelerated is right for you, or if you just want some extra suggestions or ideas along the way. If you are ready to jump in and try your own accelerated format or redesign something that you've already created. So, as always, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Learning Alchemy Lab. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe and connect with me on Instagram at The Learning Alchemist. Until next time, keep teaching with intention and creating learning that truly transforms.